So my journey of spirituality began with pain. And that began when I was 13 years old. My mother passed away because of cancer. And for a period of time, I was living with my dad. It was just like a really, really difficult time. And so I grew up in a military family. My grandfather served in World War II. My dad was in the Vietnam War. I was looking for the military or towards the military as one, as an escape. Two, I love the military at the same time. And three, to pay for college. But one thing that's always been about me is that I want to help people. So I thought when I enlisted, I was going to be a registered nurse when I got out. I came out as an EMTB. Yeah. And so enlisting was just I think it was just part of like my natural spiritual experience. I didn't know I had to go to war. And so when I got the call to get deployed, I remember I was already spiritual, practicing like yoga, meditation, and like finding myself, loving myself, and going through this. But I remember I told myself, like, I won't lose myself out there. And so I'm going in as a medic to serve, to help. It didn't matter if it was American or Iraqi or whoever it was. My thing was about service and duty. Go to war, completely big experience, right? You're just in violence. Like, you see it, you hear it, you live it, you're in the thick of it, and there's no escape, and you've left everybody behind, right? And so being in the service and being deployed and having that experience of violence really kind of honed in on the principle of nonviolence, which is what you were talking about on the stage, right? And we hear about nonviolence, like, oh, I'm a good person. I don't consider myself violent. But then it's like, go to war and you start to see like, well, the violence is leading to this. Our egos are violence. Our negative thoughts are violence, the way we speak. And so coming out of that whole experience, I was just like, I want to do something more with my life. I want to serve others in a different way. I want to find myself and help other people find themselves and really heal from the pain that, everybody goes through. And the thing is, everybody has their own war. You don't have to go to Iraq to experience war. Your war is here. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like?
For me, my story is the opposite. I was already pretty happy with everything, the things I had achieved, accomplished. I had a really good job. I had a good career. I was moving up the ladder within the company that I worked for. I used to work for a European company, and we used to get a lot of time off, vacation. And so I traveled the world. I got to experience a lot of things, good things. And at the end of the day, I questioned, like, is this it to this life? What's the next thing? Is it making more money? The next promotion, the bigger house, and then what comes next, right? So I felt like it was a wheel of just a cycle that never ended of, you can call it desires or greed or just things that, you're never satisfied with, and you're just always looking for the next thing. And that questioning made me realize it, or go deeper into questioning, but what is real success? What is real happiness? What is my purpose in this life? And that's one thing that really came to me at the age of 29, is that I wanted to live a life of meaning, a life of purpose. And I one day decided at 29 that I wanted to go on a spiritual retreat to maybe be more quiet and just maybe learn a few things that would maybe help me. And so I went to our spiritual retreat, which is Siddhayatan Spiritual Retreat. And I went there for 1 week. I took 3 workshops, and clearly the teachings and the experience that I had there fully changed my life. I went in there as one person, and within just 7 days of just learning and practicing things, I went back to my house in Houston, and I left a new person. And I knew that my life had changed from that moment on forever. And so for about 1.5 years, just practicing the teachings, following the principles, doing the exercises, gave me more clarity about what I really wanted to do with my life and what it meant to really serve others and help others, which started with me. That process begins with helping yourself first, working on yourself, improving yourself, and then you can really help others, extend that help to the rest of the world.
I'll just say that I just love hearing what drove each of you individually. I think there's so many commonalities that we can draw from. For myself, I grew up with very little. I grew up with a single mom and her 3 girls, myself, my 2 sisters. And very early on, I recognized we were different. We were different than my friends. We were different than the community around us. And by that, I mean, my mom was working about 3 jobs to produce what she could for us. And she was a school teacher, first and foremost. And so she would advocate for education for us at all costs, no matter what. And I grew up in a very curious atmosphere. I didn't really realize that I didn't have some of the necessities that one would have growing up, because it just felt as if my mom was able to provide. And so she worked tirelessly to make sure that she could provide. And very early on, I was creative, and we had many problems. We had many issues with just getting, making things just functioning, really, getting the books, getting the school things that were required, making sure we had, clothes and book things, opportunity to study. And so I was always very creative in figuring out how to put things together, how to make things, to solve problems. And my mom recognized very early that I was this creative spirit and put me into ballet. So yet another kind of weird. I was the only Black girl in ballet, myself, my younger sister. And it was at an inner city high school that we went to ballet. And it was just a further expansion of, what is out there? What are the opportunities? What is, driving each individual? And through that process, I was able to realize that there's so much that connects us as a human, beyond what we have, beyond skin color, beyond the opportunities that are in front of us, and really expanded my aperture and my drive to, strive for more, and strive for how we can communicate in a better, positive way. So what drew me to medical school was real need to understand how we worked as human beings, as humanity, how we were put together, how we were structured, just recognizing that there was so much conflict and so much violence, so much crime, and yet, we were all the same. And so it was important for me to go to medical school to gain that understanding, to gain that better appreciation for, who we are as an individual, but how are we related? How are we connected? And where is the humanity in each of us? I absolutely found that. I absolutely appreciated that, just in the one-on-one connections with people. Sorry to tear up, because it's a powerful thing.
So I feel a little bit like I'm the Forrest Gump of the group at work. And then, in the movie Forrest Gump, he just goes and he ends up in these profound situations where he's on in a battlefield, and he's at a ping pong tournament, and he has no idea how he got there or what that success came from, or else he's like cleaning out a ship where there are all the shrimp. And there are times where I feel like that was my life, in that I grew up on a farm in rural Wisconsin, or my dad and my grandfather owned the feed mill, grain elevator. It's a very rural town of less than 100 people. My high school was 12 miles, 15 miles away, a town of less than 1,000, and everybody was white. Everybody was blonde hair, blue-eyed, Norwegian, German, Danish descent. That was the way that it was. And I happen to be really good at sports just by luck, and I'm the only one in my family who went to college. But I don't know how I got there. Nobody helped me. Nobody said study for the ACT or the SAT. So somehow I found myself at college, and I ended up running in college, getting a scholarship, running in a Division I. I had never really spent any time even in Minneapolis, and here I was as a farm girl, and I just was like, no, look now, because I might not belong. But I always just put on that, here I go. And I learned to have glass half full all the time attitude, which I think has served me really well. And I ended up going to Los Angeles after college to try to make the U.S. national team. And again, had those repeat feelings of, please don't let anybody figure it out. But I always liked medicine. I always liked science. I studied chemistry, physiology, wanted to go to medical school. And by the time I figured out that the U.S. national team was people a lot faster than me, I ended up going to business school. It was a faster path to having a professional career. And I loved it and ended up in healthcare, private equity, venture capital. And I just ping-ponged my way into each thing. And I went to Morgan Stanley, and I was one of 2 women on the floor in the executive capacity. And I didn't think anything about it. I was, look out, here I am type of feeling. And when we started looking at healthcare, it was always around economics. Morgan Stanley really cares a lot about the financials and what is a good business model. So I learned this foundational sense. I had a couple of forays in running a business. And in 2017, somebody called me from the Mayo Clinic and said, there's this really cool company dealing with fetal maternal medicine. Dr. Paul Friedman, head of interventional cardiology, and he says, you guys are missing the boat. Women and their babies are at high risk. And of course I thought, okay, but you can't tell the expert that they're wrong. But of course I didn't believe it myself. And it wasn't until I started getting interested in this space and doing research that I thought, how can the United States be on par with Uzbekistan? Where's Uzbekistan, right? Like, that was my feeling. And then I went on to make another investment in a spin out on fetal maternal or on obesity management that came out of Weill Cornell. And there's very deep focus in comorbid conditions with women. And again, I'd never heard of endometriosis. I'd never heard of menopause. And one thing led to another, and I started doing due diligence on women's health, met Joe Connolly, my co-founder, and he was looking at all the conditions that fell outside of family building and how they were expensive and really common, and they were the best kept secret even among women. I had a bunch of my women from business school over, so there was maybe 30 of us, everyone educated, everyone with a strong job, everyone with really good insurance. And when I asked them about their experiences in women's health, no one said anything. And we quickly went to cocktails and dinner and talked about family. And then my phone literally blew up, and everyone had a story around endometriosis or a hysterectomy or having had, you name the story. And therein started my foray. But it wasn't like I had a calling. I stumbled upon good business principles of finding a white space but that calling has definitely shifted as you've come and spent more time figuring out, why are we so different? Why didn't anybody know this? And here we are today, educating so many other women who have the same questions and just got there by a different path.
I remember in my first year of medical school, we had cadavers. We had people who had donated their body to science. And we approached the experience in such a profound way because, we were able to dissect and fully appreciate what is on the inside. And what became very apparent to me and others in my group of 4 on each of our bodies, we had men, we had women, we had Asian, we had Black, we had white, we had pretty much all individuals in the room who had donated their bodies, and right now we were dissecting through. And yet, if we were all dissecting from the ear down, we had the same inner structures, we had the same nerve plexus in the same exact location. It was complicated, and we were only learning and appreciating just a fraction of the complicated essence of each individual. And it was, for me, an opportunity to recognize that there is a higher power, that there is something that we can't possibly understand that connects each and every one of us.
I'm Dr. Chevon Rariy, and I'm one of the voices of NEBGH.
I'm Shelley Lanning, and I'm one of the voices of NEBGH.
I am Sadhvi Siddhali Shree, and I'm one of the voices of NEBGH.
I'm Sadhvi Anubhuti, and I'm one of the voices of NEBGH.